So I want to say a big thanks to our really terrific panel of guests that we have here today. They are healthy food warriors and have been doing this for a very long time, as you'll hear about momentarily. But each of them had to drive at least an hour and a half to get here. So already you've accomplished a lot just getting here. Thankfully, it's sunny and it's not during rush hour. So we're glad we could deliver on that for you. But I wonder if each of you could just take a moment to introduce yourself briefly, and then you wanted to have...
And then we'll go around the table, name,
one more
and
time.
if you're a board member or if you're in management, what you do.
Great. Okay. Jill, why don't you start?
Sure. My name is Jill Hall. I'm the Director of Programs for Seacoast Eat Local. We're the newest addition to the Mobile Farmers Market team, and I'm thankful to be here today.
I am Sue Pronovos. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Brass City Harvest in Waterbury, Connecticut. And we're a three-tiered agricultural organization that features healthy eating, urban ag, and mobile farmers markets.
Hi, I'm Dave Herring. I'm Executive Director for Wolf's Neck Farm Foundation in Freeport, Maine. And we are both a place and an effort. We're a 626-acre coastal farm in Freeport. And we focus on farm-based education and connecting people of all ages to agriculture.
Great. I'm not Ibrahim Ali, as listed on the slide behind me, but hopefully he'll be here momentarily. He works at Gardening the Community. He's one of the co-directors there. But it's Mike Devlin from the Healthy Food Fund here in the foundation.
Let's go to Lisa,
Okay.
and then Joe, and then we'll go around the table.
Hi, I'm Lisa DeSisto. I'm the publisher of the Portland Press Herald, and I'm a board member. And hello to my friend from Wolf's Neck Farm, which is a hard thing to say.
Hi, Lisa.
And I'm Joe O'Donnell. I'm in the Dean's office up at Dartmouth Medical School, now called Geisel School of Medicine. I'm a medical oncologist by training and have gotten really interested in health promotion, wellness, disease prevention, and how to incorporate that into medical student education.
Thank you.
And I'm also on the big board, the corporate board too, besides the school.
Good afternoon, I'm Janelle Wiz-McNish. I work in the foundation and I oversee our employee service and giving program.
Good afternoon, my name is Henningsen Malatra. You can call me Henny. I'm the service and giving program manager for the foundation.
I am Suzanne, and I'm an attorney for Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. I serve as the clerk for the foundation.
I'm Rizal Finch. I'm board member.
Marty Cohen, board member.
Karen Bosey, president of the foundation.
Eric Schultz, chairman of the foundation board and president and CEO of Harvard Pilgrim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Chris Knopf, board member.
Marianne Felice, board member.
At Walrath, board member.
Heidi Brooks, board member.
I'm Rick O'Connor. I'm the vice president of marketing.
Hi, Ashley Hackett, senior programs officer at the foundation.
Great, excellent. So I think Karen alluded to this already, but we're wired up because Janelle did such an excellent job with the employee panel during the June retreat that we wanted to make sure that we captured some of the great information that comes out of this. And I think that did such a beautiful job of showing off how well run the program is and what a role model it is for other corporations as well. So great job. So now we have to do it here. So you've already heard a little bit from Karen about this, but back at the retreat, there was a lot of discussion about program evaluation and program impact. And one of the things we thought was important to do was to actually connect you to the programs instead of just talking about them, actually have them here and featured today. So as I said, we have an all-star lineup here today. And so I think it's going to be a great discussion. Just a quick reminder, all of these programs, with the exception of Jill's, was funded back in October 2015 as we launched the Healthy Food Fund, with the goal being increasing access to fresh, healthy local food for families and communities. And they're doing this primarily through food production and distribution programs and efforts. So you'll hear more about that momentarily. You have their bio, so you can see a little bit more about their background and what we're funding in their particular projects. So I'm going to just jump right in and kick it off with a question that I'd like each of you to answer. And I'm wondering if you could tell us your favorite story that illustrates how you know your organization is making a difference each and every day. So David, maybe I'll ask you to start.
Sure. So for those of you on the phone, this is Dave from Wolf's Neck. So the program that the foundation funded at Wolf's Neck is called our Teen Ag program, and it started about 5 years ago, and it kind of has a dual purpose. One is to provide a sustainable agriculture immersion experience for a group of area teens, and then to use the yield from their time on the farm producing fruits and vegetables and donate a large portion of those to area food pantries. And so the opportunity came along with Harvard Pilgrim, I think, just at the right time. The program was in its 4th year and really poised, I think, for growth. And one of the things that we're always looking at with this program is making sure that we have a deep impact where we can and having a broad impact where we can. And so the broad impact is we kind of measure that in pounds of food that we donate to area food pantries. And the deeper impact is the impact that we have on the area teens who come and work. For some of them, it's their first work experience. It's their first meaningful touch point with the food system. And certainly for all of them, it's their first time working on a farm. And in 2014, one of the young women that we hired actually ended up kind of crossing over in a way that we hadn't seen before. And so she came from a single parent home where they got their food from a food pantry. And so with this young woman, we have seen her have new access to food in a way that she hadn't before, and also kind of see that cycle of producing food and getting it from the area food pantry, all kind of within one person and one being. So it's just a story that, and I could tell you a lot more about where she's gone on with her life in terms of going on to college, et cetera. Mike is keeping us to a strict couple minutes, but that is a fun story for us to kind of think about how deep and broad our impact can be.
Have you been mic'd up? Susan, would you mind? Go ahead.
Hi,
Have you been
Sue
mic'd
from
up?
Brass City Harvest. So one of the programs that are funded by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Foundation is a healthy cooking and nutrition program that's geared towards WIC mothers, SNAP recipients. And I can go on all kinds of stories of how the mothers that we've had at different sites have come back to us and said, I made this, I made that, my family loved this, my family loved that. But one of the things that I didn't understand when I wrote the grant originally was the population of WIC mothers that exist within the Waterbury Public School system and must exist in every other large city. They're not talked about, okay? They're not spoken for. But they're 14 to 18-year-olds, emancipated minors. I know that we've made a difference when at the end of the session, a girl who's graduating, who's going to be going off on her own, is hugging us because we've given her some of the most basic skills because she doesn't have any female role model. She's emancipated. She's on her own. She doesn't know whether or not to turn on a stove, to saute, to do anything. She doesn't even have the implements. We've given them training, food, and we've solicited campaigns throughout some of the banks in our city to get cooking utensils, things that the EBT card won't pay for, things that are not on their radar screen. We've made essentially a little bridal package to give them because they're going off into a world that's unknown. It's a future that is dark. They're scared. And we're trying to do that much more to give them a bit of self-reliance for themselves and for their children. These are kids with kids. So that was one of the most impactful things that we've seen out of this program.
Great, thanks, Susan. So Jill.
Sure. For me, it's Tony. Tony is a middle-aged man. He was weighing over 300 pounds. He was underemployed, and he was involved in a work-related accident that needed extensive rehabilitation. He lost pretty much everything, his job, his income, his sense of independence. He was no longer able to drive a car. And his nutritionist at the local hospital sent him to our winter farmers market with Seacoast Eat Local. And in the 3 years that he's been with us, he's lost over 200 pounds and taken up biking. This man, he lives in Elliott. He bikes to all of our farmers markets, probably more than 2 a week in the summer and every winter one we have, and now to our mobile market. And he's just an incredible character. He tells me a knock-knock joke at every market he comes to. I have to make sure that I have a new joke for him. And he's the greatest champion for local foods and eating fresh, produced local vegetables for more than just the reasons we think of. For him, it's relationships. He tells us that when he comes to market, he loves coming because he feels important, because someone is going to talk to him that day and help him that day and teach him about a new food or a new skill that he can use at home. He loves wearing our t-shirt when he's on his bike and taking it to all of the markets with him. And he's not our typical target consumer. He's a white, middle-aged, single male, not typically who we target. Typically, we spend a lot of our energy working with children and families, and we do a lot of great work in that area. But he's also a reminder for us that eating healthily and eating locally is for everyone, and that everyone can engage in it in the level that they're comfortable, having relationships with vendors or enjoying education or enjoying a connection to his community that he's lost through his inability to work. So mostly I think about Tony when I think about who our story or our prime example of what we hope to accomplish is.
Great, excellent. So it's great to have Ibrahim Ali here, fresh from the gardens of Springfield, Massachusetts. So thank you.
You're actually right about
yeah,
that.
I know I'm right. I know. Ibrahim, I'm wondering if you could take a moment to just tell us a little bit about your organization, if you could, and then I'll ask you the question.
Cool. I'm one of two directors for Garden and Community, which is a Springfield-based urban agriculture program whose focus is on youth leadership development. We've been in existence for about 13 years now, I think. It's 2002, actually 14 years. And we incorporate a lot of different things in terms of how we grow the food, as well as how we deliver the food. So we're embracing a lot of the sustainable kind of agriculture techniques that are found here in Massachusetts and around the country, actually around the world. And in addition to that, because of working with youth and we want to kind of embrace other, sustainable practices, we have the kids riding bikes to deliver the food. And we, among other things, collect a lot of rainwater on the site to not contribute to kind of using the city's water. I think I can just go into the question about
so
the
how do you know your organization's making a difference?
So there's two things that really stick out to me. One is, when we're outside, two of the locations are very highly visible streets. One is Walnut Street, the other is Hancock Street. So there's always traffic in those two areas. And one thing that happens really consistently is people will come to the fence and they'll kind of wave us down and we'll go over and we'll talk to people. And it's usually one of two things. They really are interested in what we're doing. They want to tell us that they're so proud of the youth and they like to see us out there. The other thing is that they advise us on how we should be growing the food. So we have to kind of embrace and some people come with a lot of actually very useful kind of advice. Other folks come with very different, very strange advice. I'm not really sure where it comes from. I'm sure it's useful somewhere, maybe on Mars or somewhere else. And the other thing is, we do provide a stipend for the youth. But what I've been finding lately is that, young people are coming to the garden and the same thing. They'll see us working, they want to come and talk to us. And we'll explain to them that, you have to volunteer for 3 days and then you can join the program. But what I've been finding lately is like a lot of the young people just want to be there. They just want to be there. They just want to volunteer. They just want to participate. And I think that's a little bit different from what in the past has been, it's a job, they want to work, they want to get money. But some of the young people now, it seems like, particularly this young man named William, who just want to contribute to the community. And I think that's a very kind of distinct thing that I'm noticing lately.
Okay, great. So very different programs and models in operation and how they know they're making a difference there. So it's great to hear that. I'm wondering if each of you could talk about when you come to work every day, what inspires you to do the work? And then conversely, what makes you tired about doing the work as well? Dave?
Sure. So Wolf's Neck is a really powerful place. As you can imagine, I mean, being a farm on the coast of Maine, it sounds idyllic, and it is, and it's also really unique. It has, we have historic buildings and a campground and a summer camp and all of these wonderful ways for people to connect with nature and with sustainable farming. And when I took this job, I remember it was about 4.5 years ago, and I remember the board at the time really felt like they had been babysitting the farm and wanted to help it grow up. So for me, that meant helping take this place beyond being a pretty face and really using it to have an impact. And so the opportunities are tremendous for us at Wolf's Neck. Everything from the thousands of kids that we're able to connect with where food comes from and have them go home and tell their parents that they picked blueberries or tried kale for the first time, or went clamming along the ocean or hiked on trails. To training new farmers. We're launching a new initiative right now to train new organic dairy farmers using really innovative practices and trying to find kind of broader ways to support a more sustainable food system. So for me, it's not hard to get inspired at all. Just by driving to that place is inspiring, but spending time there and really being immersed in that place, you start to appreciate more and more how powerful a place like that can be in all of our lives daily, and not just at the farm, but throughout the communities that we serve.
Great, excellent. Ibrahim, you want to take it on?
Sure. I think, just in terms of what you were saying too, you notice certain people who are consuming the food that you are growing, and you slowly kind of see the transformation and the excitement that people have when they're getting this fresh produce. And you notice the kind of the change in people's diets and, when they're purchasing the food, they're asking a lot of questions like, what is this? They want to eat things that they never eaten before. We get people to try things off of the vine directly. And people are shocked that things taste that different compared to what they've had in a grocery store. And so that kind of continues to inspire me, in addition to the fact that, we have a lot of room to grow and learn in terms of how to utilize various different herbs and other varieties of vegetables that people are not so used to, that we slowly incorporate onto what we're growing and how we're trying to get more health into the community food-wise. I think the most difficult thing or the most challenging thing is just not knowing how the weather is kind of changing over the course of week to week, month to month. I mean, being in New England, you never know how the weather is. I know out here in Boston, you guys have horrible weather. It gets cold, it gets hot, it's very confusing. At least where we are, it's a little bit more stable in the valley. But, we have these kind of extremes of temperature. And I think that's kind of those are the two kind of things that are, kind of inspiring and challenging. In addition to that, like, because of the fact that on 2 of our sites, we don't have like a water hose to go to, we have to actually collect rainwater. It really requires us to think about how we are growing the food, because we just can't have the beds out there and just think that we can just come with the water hose every single day. It doesn't work like that. So we really have to incorporate plants and techniques so that we can conserve as much as we can. And so that also kind of brings another kind of new instrument to the palette.
Susan.
So I'm inspired because Waterbury is more or less a mill town, full of brownfields, blighted land, very poor community, more than 34% on SNAP, 25,000 residents on WIC. It's kind of a sad place. But before Brass City Harvest was around, no one ever talked about the greening of Waterbury. No one ever talked about food systems. No one ever talked about access to food, farm-to-school initiatives, nutrition, healthy corner stores. No one talked about what is purely a right for every citizen, access to fresh food. So that inspires me every day. It's probably the driving force behind all of my programs, whether it's working on a planned redevelopment project in one of the worst areas of the city of Waterbury to create a large food-based distribution program, or to go out and do a healthy cooking program, to see the faces of seniors and WIC mothers, and yes, the kids with kids. It's inspiring. What makes me tired is what makes every executive director tired. It's difficult dealing with recruiting and maintaining staff. The nonprofit mission isn't a job at Costco, and it's not a job at any kind of retailer. It's a mission. And your staff, which could be young kids, they have to embrace it. They have to know that you're going to be performing acts of stewardship. And even though you raise the salary to be competitive with retailers and whatnot, sometimes you just can't pay enough. And it gets to be very frustrating to get kids to, or even adults for that matter, to show up every day and embrace the mission and the vision that you have. So that's tiring. Regulatory issues, especially in agriculture, get to be very tiring. And of course, in Connecticut, legislative issues can get to be very, very tiring. And that's all I'll say on that subject. But overall, very good.
Just, there's one interesting project that Susan is undertaking in Waterbury, and I'm wondering if you could just explain it briefly.
We are endeavoring to construct the state's first food hub, and it's a unique type of hybrid food hub, not only for wholesale and distribution, but to comply as a biohazard food processing facility to provide access to farmers who are unable to attain GAP status under the new federal Food Safety Modernization Act standards. There's going to be on-site greenhouses that will be leased. We also have greenhouse space that will be occupied by Waterbury Public School students. And since I already have a year-round farmers market, we're going to relocate into a new modern facility and have a commercial kitchen operation, both for growers and then one for kitchen prep for our healthy cooking nutrition program, so that we could have them in a secure place in hours to accommodate working families.
And that's both inspiring and exhausting at the same time,
No,
right?
it's scary. It's not exhausting. It's scary.
It's incredible. Thank you. Jill, please.
What is the biohazard?
This facility is going to be considered a food processing facility. So we're going to be bringing in food that may be tainted with E. coli, listeria, whatever. That germ, that parasite, can't come past the front door. It will contaminate everything. So we're working with different biohazard companies, consultants, to provide us with the best technical specifications in the construct. I mean, you do it once and you do it right the first time round, so that we decrease significantly the risk of transmission of foodborne illness across equipment. This is going to be a facility where your feet have to be wiped on a sanitation mat. Everybody's wearing booties and Mylar suits, and so we're going to look like a regular lab because we're going to be held to the highest standard. The liability is tremendous, not only for Brass City Harvest, but for the city of Waterbury, because we're going to be on their land.
Thanks. Jill, please.
Sure. It can be really exhausting to feel puny and insignificant in the face of very serious problems. And we have very serious problems, I think, on a macro and a micro level. Not us as an organization, we're great. But in the universe, we wonder about what in systems thinking we call wicked problems. How are we going to make fresh, healthy local food affordable to all people of all incomes in all the towns of the seacoast, and also afford to pay farmers a living, dignified, and still very, very modest wage? It's a wicked problem. And also on a micro level, I make the round of church suppers in the city where I live, and it is really hard to look at someone, oftentimes younger than I am, who is not completely in the room with me because they're on heroin, and convince them that they should care about my half-price spinach. It's as I'm adorned in all of the privilege that I wear in front of them, it's exhausting, and humbling, and I don't know how we're ever going to get past some of those things. But I'm inspired always, at the end of the day, I tell myself that it's just food and that everybody deserves access to food. And it's, about actions and not stereotypes. And if you are high on heroin and you want 2 cucumbers, I am happy to give you 2 cucumbers. Or if you come to my market, and I think you're probably gaming me for some of our incentives this week, at the end of the day, I don't really care, because it's just food. And if you want to come here and get food to feed yourself or your family, I am not going to begrudge you a couple heads of lettuce or a squash or even the cider donut that we might have at the market that way. So when I come back to that simple piece, that it's always just about food and everybody deserves access to good, healthy, local food, those problems don't matter so much anymore in the moment.
Beautifully said. Thanks. So before I unleash you all to the board, I wanted to have you look into your crystal ball 50 years from now. You all look fabulous. You look as good as you do now. What do you think the future of the work is that you're currently doing at that time? So maybe I'll start with Jill, if I may.
50 years, right? I've been laughing about 50 years all week. 50 years feels a little hubristic to me to comment on. But I think to return to the idea of those wicked problems that we have, we've grown a lot as an organization in a short amount of time. And we've been lucky to do so, and the universe is always aligned for us. But we've taken care of a lot of the low-hanging fruit. There wasn't, an information directory for local foods, and we created one. There wasn't a winter farmers market series, and we created one. There wasn't SNAP acceptance at farmers markets. We created one. And there wasn't access in some of the low-income towns in our counties, and so we created a mobile market. We've taken a lot of that low-hanging fruit now, and I wonder, increasingly we hit more and more against these problems that are so much bigger than we are. We have very little power to impact, how much money individuals can receive in SNAP EBT every month, and all kinds of issues like that. And how can we afford to pay farmers more but keep food affordable? The bigger we get and the more successful we get, and the more of those kind of ground level problems we've taken care of, the more we hit these walls. And so I wonder, in our future, in 5 years or 50 years, what is going to be the next frontier for us, and what is going to be the tipping point where we are able to solve some of those problems. And I was a gender studies major, so I say that we're entering into third wave feminism all the time, where we don't really know what it is anymore. So I don't know exactly what our future will hold in a couple years or in 50 years. Forget it, Mike. But at some point it means breaking these wicked puzzles and figuring out what the paradigm shift is going to be.
Great, thanks. Susan.
I'm going to be dead in 50 years.
No.
But my legacy would be that Connecticut is going to have other facilities very similar to ours. We know of different plans on the table. So in 50 years, in the decades to come, it would be my hope that Brazos City Harvest would play an integral role in connecting all these different food processing facilities to create a seamless transfer of food from other parts of the country and grown in state, because obviously we have, like Massachusetts, a shorter growing season, getting food in and distributing it out to where it's needed in state and beyond, creating new markets for our farmers, giving them economic support, a will to live in the next 50 years. We fear for agriculture in Connecticut. We are already really small and our farmers are being squeezed. So we're looking at different avenues of connectivity. Brazos City Harvest is not an island, and neither is a food system here or a food system here or a food system there. It's going to take decades to connect all of the pieces. But I'm hoping that we have a more food secure region that impacts not only Connecticut, but the surrounding states.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Ibrahim.
Well, my hope would be that the current system of oppression would be replaced with one that embraces justice, in which case my organization wouldn't have to exist anymore. So I guess if that would be my hope, is that GTC would be transformed to something completely different, because in Springfield, at least, that would be the case. So.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Great. David.
Yeah, I think that in 50 years, I mean, like the others have said, 50 years is hard to think about because it's so far down the road. But when I think about the food system and kind of the challenges facing it, everything from climate to kind of the profitability and viability of farming, small scale farming, we're kind of positioning ourselves as a champion for family scale farming. And when you think about, it was roughly around 50 years ago or so that agriculture became kind of industrialized in the same way that we know it now. And we're kind of now in this somewhat unraveling of that industrialized agriculture in a way that I think is more forward thinking than we have ever been around our food, and really appreciating that healthy food shouldn't just be for wealthy people, that it should be for all people, and that the people producing that food should also be supported in a way that the rest of us are in our careers. So when I think 50 years down the road, I hope that we've kind of gone back in time to a time when agriculture was more a part of our society in a way that was you could touch it as opposed to kind of an industrialized form of it. And hopefully in doing so, we're taking better care of the environment, we're reducing our impacts on climate change, and we're a healthier people because of it.
Okay, great. Wow, some provocative ideas here that they've all brought up. Now we open it to all of you to ask anything that you might like. Mark.
Inspiring work by all of you. Thank you. It's really, you're doing such great stuff. We had a conversation prior to the panel about sort of measuring the impact of the work. And I'm wondering if each of you could just name sort of one metric, the one metric that you feel best measures the impact that you're having in your community. Is it pounds of food produced? Is it numbers served? Whatever that metric might be.
Well, I mean, I can say that is a big kind of question mark in the work that we're doing. And we've kind of asked and have been working with a number of folks to try just for that particular thing. So there is a kind of a organization that looks at measuring more than just like pounds grown, although that is an indicator and it tells you, yeah, people are eating the food. But we're looking at also, like this year actually, we're looking at like changes in real estate value. We're looking at impact of crime in the neighborhood. We're looking at, kind of the youth that we work with. And it's been difficult, but just trying to trace, their trajectory and things like that. So there's the standard things that are very real, like, how much food you grow, at least, that's something that's important for people to know, pounds and all of that. But some of these other things haven't really been looked at. So we're kind of, reinventing or inventing the wheel as it goes along.
For us, it's our SNAP incentive redemption. So just to say really quickly, we offer incentives programs for SNAP recipients at farmers markets. So if they swipe $5 of their own money, they get matching $5. I think Massachusetts has a similar program. Yes. And so it's not for us necessarily the amount that we give out, although that's great. It's the amount that we redeem, because that's the number that people are actually using at our markets. And it's about the time of month in which they do so. So, there are lots of different metrics that we work with, but there's so much more to be learned from that particular metric, because that's the metric for us that really speaks to behavior change. Are they visiting us every week? Are they using the opportunities that we're providing to them? And are they making a consistent habit of coming to visit us? And also, to a huge extent, we've learned that we're part of their financial planning toolkit. They count on our money to get them week to week or month to month, or from when they know they'll have SNAP benefits to when they know that they won't. And so I find that that particular metric has the most number of layers for us in terms of being able to understand our SNAP clientele and if we're really doing the work that we hope to be doing.
Ours would be pre and post testing, anecdotal stories. We do collect letters from our clients. We do encourage them to write and tell us what they liked, what they didn't like, how it changed their lives, what they added in their daily dietary intake thanks to what they learned from us. And we're measuring retention rates and client numbers.
We're really focused on jobs created. So the reason that we have to give out all this food in large part is because people don't have money to buy it. And they don't have money to buy it because they haven't been able to secure meaningful employment that pays them enough to buy this food. So we're really focused on creating jobs, and we're doing that by trying to bring back more small-scale farmers to the landscape, especially in a place like Maine, where the rural economy and the rural communities in Maine are where some of the issues are most acute. The poverty levels are the highest, but also the land base is the least expensive, and the opportunities to bring a lot of that land back into farming production is the greatest. So we see a real opportunity there.
Great. Please, Marianne.
So all four of you mentioned that you're working with young people, near and dear to my heart. One of the problems is that we can reach young people, and hopefully that's where we invest because they're the future and will influence other ones. But I worry if there's a way that we can use our youth and our young people to actually influence their parents so that we can make it broader. Have any of you tried that in any way? We've tried it in a program in central Massachusetts that we're trying to evaluate to see if it's been effective at all. Have any of you tried anything like that we could learn from you?
Can I give a history lesson from it? So Representative Walrath will appreciate this. So the beginning of I used to be a 4-H agent, and actually I'm trained as an educator. The beginning of 4-H really kind of started as government propaganda, right? So we wanted to increase our GDP. And we couldn't get farmers to change their farming practices. So we said, great, we'll take all of their kids, we'll teach them these new methods of farming, and either they'll convince their parents, or when they grow up, they'll do it differently, and we'll have this generational change. And that didn't work out great for 4-H. But it's certainly the same principle for us. And we see that at markets all the time. I mentioned Tony, who's, a single middle-aged male, not totally our target audience, but we see a lot of families who come to the market for its entertainment and educational value. It's a safe place where they can bring their kids on the weekend and kill a couple hours so they're not killing each other at home. And our vendors are great. They're allowed to touch the vegetables, pick up the vegetables. We always have tasting tables. And it's always the kids who want to come and try the Swiss chard stem pesto and then get their mom to go buy Swiss chard and bread so that that's what they can make at home for dinner. And I think they're naturally more adventurous eaters, even though, some of the research says that that's not the case. But I think they're more willing to try for the first time. And that's what we see at market a lot. So, I think it goes both ways. I think there are parents pushing kids to eat healthier, but I think if you can find the excitement piece, kids are certainly taking that up the chain, and definitely in a market setting that is social and relaxed, and where the vendor is telling them, like, yes, you can pick up my purple carrots or golden beets, and they're able to to experiment and have that tactile experience at the market, for sure.
We've done after-school programming, both under subcontract and through grant funding. We've done 2 different models depending on the audience and the school system, because we've done one of the contiguous towns as well. We've done parent contracts, so that this isn't a program that's just for the kids, it's for the parents, it's for the family. So we have the parents come in, meet with us, meet with our nutritionist, and sign a contract that they will cook whatever particular recipe comes home. If you want your kid in this program, you will then cook this item. We provide simple items on a SNAP budget using fresh food. 1 item a week isn't going to kill anybody, but it's a start of a behavior change. And everybody gets excited. The kids report to us that it's actually happening. But again, it's dependent upon the audience. If you're in a different rural setting, the parents are genuinely invested. In the city of Waterbury, we need to add an incentive to it. In other words, we have to give them the ingredients to take home with them so it will get made. But incentivizing is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just know your audience, but those are the 2 things that we've worked with.
In the recent past, we worked with a group that was at the YMCA, and they brought a number of families over to have like a small plot of land, and they would grow the food and then cook with it. That particular program, I'm not sure where it went because they did it 1 year and then maybe they lost their funding, they didn't return. But for our youth in particular, I would just say like it's informal in the sense that we encourage them to bring home food, and most of them do. So we're kind of assuming that the food is being used, but we don't measure that. And you brought that up. It was actually something I was just thinking maybe that's something we could try to measure a little bit more in detail. But we, I know that it happens, but just we haven't recorded that information yet, as far as I know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we have a number of different ways that we're doing stuff like that. So we use Salesforce as an organization. It's a business tool that may be somewhat unusual for a nonprofit to be using, but we see ourselves very much as a social business. And one of the things that Salesforce can do for us is identify how many different touch points one of our stakeholders has had with the organization. And in that, maybe they bought a turkey from us, they sent a kid to summer camp, they came to our fall festival, they came to a farm-to-table dinner, they went camping there. And we're constantly looking to try and up the number of touch points that people have with our community, because we feel like the more touch points they have, the more opportunities that they've been given to enjoy healthy, fresh food, to enjoy outdoors and time at the farm.
Great. Heidi and then Pat.
I was curious about your comment in terms of your vision for 50 years in the future. I think in different ways you're all talking about addressing some of the inequality in the world, but it seems to me that there's often a vision of the future that involves kind of the community aspect of food production. So do you see that continue? You were talking about kind of working yourself out of a job, but do you see that your work in community building and food production as part of that vision, or do you really feel like there won't? What do you see then if your organization doesn't exist in 50 years?
Well, I like growing food. I think at the scale that we're doing it at, I know the kids enjoy it. It's hard work, but it has many rewards. When I say that it would be a system of justice, what I mean is that maybe we would exist, maybe we wouldn't. I think that there's a lot of opportunity, even in our city, for no one to have to be going to school hungry. At this point in time, in 2016, I don't think in this country or even around the world, that shouldn't be the reality. But in Springfield, Massachusetts, I know there are thousands of kids going to school every day that are hungry. And so justice would mean that wouldn't be the thing that would be happening. It would mean that when people wanted to look to fresh food as an option, they wouldn't have to drive 2 miles to get to where a location to where they can purchase the food. It could mean farmers markets, every day. It could mean delivery services every day. It could mean more just a supermarket that serves fresh local food in the neighborhood I live in. So those are the things that I'm talking about. Whether or not I would have a job, I think I'm pretty smart, so I think I'd be able to make something happen for myself. But just in terms of the general mission of our organization, I would hope that in the future it would reflect one in which where we wouldn't have to be up against such a big wall in terms of people feeding and being able to not be hungry.
Does anybody else want to take a stab? No? Okay. Pat, you had a question.
I always get back to the saying about the fact if you don't have farms, you don't have food. And so many of the farmers that are in existence today are old and ready to retire. And I'm really concerned about how we're going to get the younger generation involved in farming. It's a tough job, it costs money, and they need the support. And without having those farms, if they sell, that's farmland that's gone, and once it's sold, you don't get it back. So what are we going to do to get this next generation of people interested in farming?
Well, one thing I think that would be good or interesting or something worth trying would be to tie student loans into farming some kind of way, where if you want to be a farmer, you would get some reduction in your student loans if you went to college or what have you. I think that would be a big help. I think what you were referring to, talking about kind of the dismantling of the industrial food system into one in which maybe we're more regional, I think that's another big step. I think that we, generally speaking in this country, we have a sense of food that's very skewed because we think it's supposed to be cheap. We think it's supposed to be available 24/7 year round, no matter what it is. I should be eating watermelons in January and tomatoes in February, and all these kind of ideas. And it seems like that's the the norm in our society is these a full supermarket. I think in other places around the world, they're more regional and they're more seasonal. So when you go into the supermarket, you see things that reflect the season that you're in. We have to kind of change our consumption. I think the farmers are doing the best that they can. I think that they're doing incredible work, but we have industrialized that process to the point where it's unreasonable to think that we'll be able to maintain that type of growing with the continued destruction of the soil and the whatnot. The future is going to be regional, in my opinion. I think that people are going to have to return to, in New England particularly, we'll have to bring some of these places that are not being developed and return them back to farmers. And we have to be able to provide, again, like what you were saying, a more living wage and living standard for people to be able to afford to do farming and feed your family. Until that happens, I think what you're talking about is going to continue to kind of get worse.
I think that's a loaded issue in that you could approach it legislatively and in grassroots form. I think from the foundation's point of view, in looking at future outreach, certainly funding grassroots organizations. I think you have 4 grassroots organizations here. We're all in some way trying to reach out to youth. You have rural, you have urban, especially in the urban centers. Kids know food comes through a drive-through window. They don't know it grows. And we found that the simplest fruit and vegetable products, they don't understand it. There is a total disconnect between the earth and what's food and the food that's produced and what they're consuming. So they can't empathize with the farmer and the farmer's plight. They can't envision a future in agriculture. So supporting grassroots organizations that get kids involved so that maybe one or two of these kids will go on to be a small-sized farmer or a medium-sized farmer is a great thing. Legislatively and through advocacy efforts, support of the land grant institutions in each state, to keep ag programs active to support 4-H. Everything is rolling back. There's cuts all over the place. When you cut a 4-H program, you're cutting a vital link between the kids and future farmers of America. That's a really loaded question with many, many answers.
Yeah, it is a loaded question. I mean, or it's a challenging question to answer. I mean, I think the work that we're focused on is providing a pathway to farm ownership and farm operation. You know, we're seeing a huge shift from the paradigm of growing up on your parents' farm or your grandparents' farm and taking that over. Kids are leaving that existence behind, and they don't want that life that they saw for their parents and their grandparents. And so for us, it's about inspiring this next generation of farmers and showing them the way, showing them how to get there. So one of the things that we're really focused on is demonstrating a viable and replicable model of farming. So using our farm as a demonstration for how they could then get into farming themselves and then use that to train them and then connect them with the web of support services that are out there to help them launch their farming businesses. Because if farmers don't see them, if young people and people don't see farming as a viable business opportunity, a viable career opportunity, they're not going to enter into it. So that's one of the key ways that we're focused on it, but that doesn't even touch on the fact that, you know, when people say, well, I can't eat organic, that's too expensive. Well, the truth of the matter is, no, that's just the actual value of producing that food oftentimes, because a lot of times what we'll see is the organic food section isn't the government subsidized food section on some levels. It's somewhat separated because the conventional food industry in large part has been subsidized through corn and wheat production and incentives all of these years, and soy. And so we have come to expect that food will be really cheap, and that's wrong. And what happens is that passes all the way down to the farmer, who's barely scraping by to produce food that's not really even that healthy. So don't get me started on that piece.
I mean, I would echo that. I think, you know, the two things that I would reiterate is this conversation about the cost of good food. You know, whoever started the conversation that organic food isn't more expensive or it doesn't cost more to shop at the farmer's market, that argument is not working and it is not true. And we need to abandon it completely and have the conversation about this is the cost of good, equitable food, and it's more, and we have to get used to it. You know, and the other piece is absolutely land ownership and trying to reduce some of that debt burden. So in my county, less than 10% of you know, real estate plots for sale are 5 acres or more, which makes it pretty hard to farm. You know, also, I would say, you know, in that vein, the most immediate and impactful response I've seen in my area to make farming more affordable is for conservation organizations to purchase the development rights to land tracts so that the value of the land decreases oftentimes by half or more. And young farmers, which we're blessed to have a multitude of in my region, are able to take on a more manageable debt load and in order to be able to you know, own and manage a property as a viable business.
How large does a farm have to be for an independent farmer in a not, you know, I'm not talking about, you know, starting a farm in Cambridge, Massachusetts on 10 acres, but, you know, where you guys operate, how large does a farm have to be for an independent farmer to actually get by?
My answer, and I hope I get challenged on this, is that it's different for everyone. So, you know, different farms have different niches. Some are CSA farms, some only go to market, some only have their farm stand on their property. You know, in southern Rockingham County, you can't be a competitive farm unless you have at least one greenhouse operating year-round. In the north of Stratford County, nobody has a greenhouse. So it's really dependent on the local market, and I think on education. You can be the best dairy farmer in the world and know everything there is to know about cows or everything there is to know about beets or lettuce, but if you can't put together a business plan, you can't be successful. So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a minimum or a maximum, but it's about the local market and about education and business training.
Ruth, did you have a question?
I did.
Because I want to pay attention to the time.
Yeah.
The work that you all do is fantastic, and I can feel your heart being in your work. I think one of the things that's important for this kind of work, either as it is now or as it may change in the future, is the leadership. And I'm wondering if you all, in each of your individual circumstances, is at a point where you begin to think about the next generation of leaders of your organization now as opposed to 50 years down the road, with the skills of either continuity or challenges and changes, and beginning to get that in place, if it's appropriate. Some it looks like it might not be appropriate, others it might, so I don't want to make judgments there, but I think the continuity of leadership.
Well, listen, Ruth, working in a nonprofit sector has made me look a lot older than maybe I am.
All those vegetables you're eating.
I'll worry about succession planning in another 10 or 15 years. I'm just kidding. It's a really important issue facing. I know, I'm just kidding. I couldn't tell if you were pointing to me or Ibrahim. I think it's super important for all of us to be thinking about that. I mean, I remember when I started in the nonprofit sector, I remember hearing people say, wow, you're getting into a management role at just the right time because there's going to be so many leaders in the nonprofit sector retiring. And that was actually one of the things that cemented my thinking around, I'm going to stay in this sector because I think there will be opportunities for me from a career perspective, but also to make a difference. And so I'm always trying to think about ways to inspire the people who work for me to think about themselves in this sector in the long run, and that it's not just a quick flash and then I'm back to a job that maybe pays more or is whatever, has different benefits or whatever. So it's just, I think it's something that all leaders have to think about, and not everybody is comfortable playing a leadership or management role. I mean, we all know that, and so trying to find the people who have that potential and could see themselves in that role, and really trying to build them up as in themselves and seeing themselves as future leaders.
Because our organization is relatively young, and we've always been very grassroots and independent, I think a lot of our kind of doing things for the first time with the intention of how things would be working 10 or 5 years down the line is how we've kind of structured the board as well as the kind of the organization. And it really informs the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis because we're kind of doing things for the first time. So, I would say that, our kind of goal or focus is always to recruit or to try to uplift the individuals that are currently working with us. And not in a nepotism kind of way, but we do want to, recruit and find youth or young people that have been working with us to fill positions as they open up or as they are created. So most of the people who work with us are from the neighborhood, more or less. So, kind of just, I would say that would be like something that we're really thinking about and are intentional in terms of how we are hiring and thinking about these things. Yeah, I think that's.
For the last year, we've been engaged with the Connecticut Community Foundation, which is a Waterbury-based local community foundation. It serves 21 towns. They have a nonprofit assistance program and an officer dedicated to assisting nonprofits in developing everything from strategic plans to succession plans. So in the last year, we've engaged them to not only assist us in reorganizing our board, looking ahead to the future, but as we've grown in programming and now capital infrastructure, we look at a succession plan in case I get run over by a bus. I mean, stranger things have happened. I'm farther away from retirement than, well, maybe not in some days. But I'm far enough away that it's not a worry. However, we're looking at a major project, and it's going to require additional directors. And so that's what we're working on currently. So it's something that's certainly on our radar screen, and it's an active function of the organization structure right now.
I can't speak for anyone else, but being very close to retirement myself, I can tell you all. No, so, you know, this is never what I thought I would be doing, and a career in nonprofit management is not for me, although I enjoy my job immensely. And I wasn't even looking for a job when I took this job. You know, I came here because I couldn't resist the opportunity to build a ship. I am my organization's first full-time paid director, and you know, I manage programs and I manage staff and I fundraise, but I see my primary responsibility as building an identity for my organization that is separate from any one individual, because we've been an organization that's been run and shaped by single individuals, and we can't hope to continue to exist in that way. You know, the organization has to have a professional identity and life of its own that's apart from any one person who's associated with it, whether they're a founding board member or the organization's director or our market staff. So, you know, certainly that's something that we think about all the time.
Great questions. Thank you very much, everybody. And boy, I have to say, every time I hear these stories, I realize just how multifaceted and complicated the work is that they're doing. It's not easy, but my gosh, they're adamant and hell-bent to make sure that they're making food more accessible to people in our region. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.